Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the fascinating biology behind a pretty complex molecule called phosphatidylserine and look at how it physically shapes your thoughts, your moods, and your memories. We spend so much time talking about how to train our brains, but today, we're actually going to look at the physical building blocks required to make all that training possible in the first place. Okay, let's just dive right into this by asking a foundational question about the very architecture of your mind. When you remember a childhood birthday, or say learn a brand new skill, what is physically happening inside your head? Like what material is shifting and forming to actually store that data? It's so easy to think of the brain as just this biological computer, right? But unlike a computer made of silicon and copper, your brain is built out of fats, proteins, and water. And among those fats, there's one master molecule that stands out as absolutely essential for your memory and cognition. Get this, a single biological compound called phosphatidylserine makes up a massive 13 to 15% of the total phospholipid pool in your human cerebral cortex. It's profoundly enriched in your neural tissues, specifically packed into the gray matter and synaptic membranes of your brain. So this isn't just some trace nutrient. We are talking about the literal structural foundation of your most complex neurological functions. So here's our roadmap for today. 1. Meet the brain's master molecule. 2. How PS powers your brain. 3. Aging, memory, and decline. 4. Stress, mood, and focus. 5. From cow brains to soybeans. And 6. The verdict on supplementing. Let's start with Section 1, Meet the brain's master molecule. So phosphatidylserine, which we're just going to call PS from here on out to save our breath, is a naturally occurring phospholipid. At a molecular level, it's basically two fatty acids attached to a serine amino acid. Now, your body actually synthesizes PS locally right there in the brain through a cellular manufacturing center called the endoplasmic reticulum. But we also get a significant amount of it from dietary sources. Historically, humans consumed a ton of this stuff through organ meats, think beef brain, chicken heart, and liver, as well as fish like mackerel and tuna, and even some plant sources like white beans. It forms a critical structural component of cell membranes throughout your entire body, but for sure, it is most famous for what it does inside your head. Moving on to Section 2, How PS powers your brain. Deep within the inner layer of your cell membranes, PS acts as a sort of biological docking platform. It creates this highly localized, negatively charged electrostatic domain, which essentially acts like a magnet, recruiting and anchoring signaling proteins. It fundamentally facilitates synaptic transmission by allowing synaptic vesicles, which are basically tiny neurotransmitter packages, to fuse with the neuronal membrane. This fusion releases their chemical signals into the synaptic cleft, that microscopic gap between your cells. It's also absolutely crucial for the synthesis and activity of neurotransmitters you've probably heard of, like acetylcholine, dopamine, and serotonin. But honestly, perhaps the most fascinating mechanic of all is its role in your immune response. When a brain cell is damaged or dying, PS, which usually hides on the inside of the cell membrane, actually flips to the outside. This exposed PS acts as a literal eat-me signal to your immune system, triggering microglial cells to swoop in, clear away the dead neurons, and protect your brain from inflammatory damage. How cool is that? So the crucial takeaway here is that every single time you learn, focus, or recall a memory, including right this very second as you process the words on screen and listen to my voice, you are relying on these PS-mediated fusions and transmissions in real time. Without PS, the electrical and chemical communication between your neurons would literally just grind to a halt. Which brings us to Section 3, Aging, Memory, and Decline. Unfortunately, as the human brain ages, we see biochemical alterations and structural deterioration that actively start to impair that crucial neurotransmission we just talked about. This loss of phospholipid asymmetry, meaning the delicate, uneven arrangement of fats in the cell breaks down, has naturally drawn intense attention from major organizations researching cognitive vitality and Alzheimer's disease. Researchers are asking a very logical question. Well, if aging causes a structural deterioration of the brain's lipid content, could normalizing that lipid content with a supplement actually mitigate the decline? And the data we have is incredibly compelling. Multiple studies highlight that providing the brain with exogenous PS, meaning PS taken from outside the body like a supplement, can have a profound impact. Just look at this quote from the Nutrition Journal in 2015. It points out that doses between 300 to 800 milligrams per day can safely slow, halt, or even reverse biochemical alterations and structural deterioration in nerve cells. Clinical trials have shown time and again that it supports human cognitive functions, specifically helping form short-term memories and consolidate long-term ones, effectively combating age-associated memory impairment.
Section 4. Stress, Mood, and Focus.
This isn't just about aging, though. Check out the demographic breakdown here. In a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial involving children with ADHD, just 2 months of PS supplementation led to a staggering 93% decrease in total inattention errors during tasks, along with significant boosts in short-term memory. Let that sink in, 93%. Then, if you look at healthy men undergoing intense physical stress, like heavy exercise, studies showed that taking PS actually physically blunted the stress-induced activation of the HPA axis, that's your body's primary stress response system, and effectively lowered cortisol levels. And for elderly patients, it produced notable improvements in late-life depressive disorders and overall mood. It really acts like a multi-tool for the brain.
Section 5, From Cow Brains to Soybeans.
Now here is where the story takes a wild turn. Back in the 1980s and 90s, the PS used in all those incredibly successful early clinical trials was derived from the bovine cortex. Yeah, literally cow brains. It was highly effective. But there was a catch, a big one. It carried the terrifying risk of transmitting bovine spongiform encephalopathy, universally known as mad cow disease. Obviously, that is not going to work for a mass-market health supplement. So modern production completely shifted to plant-based sources, primarily soy and sunflower lecithin. Impartially speaking, this was a massive win for safety. Plant-derived PS is fully recognized as safe by the FDA. However, because the plant-based version has a slightly different fatty acid composition attached to the serine molecule, the clinical results, while still notable and definitely effective, have proven to be somewhat weaker than those original cow brain extracts.
So let's wrap this up with Section 6, the verdict on supplementing. If you decide to take it, here's what happens. Step 1, you swallow PS, and it hits your gut. Your gut is a harsh environment full of enzymes that heavily metabolize it and convert it into other phospholipids, so it does get heavily broken down. But step 2, research confirms that a small yet incredibly vital fraction of this oral PS survives. It manages to reach your systemic circulation completely intact. And finally, step 3, both animal and human studies confirm that this surviving exogenous PS successfully crosses the blood-brain barrier, reaching the target tissues and physically increasing the PS concentration in your neural architecture. So yes, despite the gauntlet of your digestive system, supplementing actually physically alters the structural makeup of your brain.
I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder today. We've seen that PS is the fundamental biological platform for your memory, focus, and neurotransmission. But as our modern diets have completely shifted away from traditional PS-rich foods like liver, kidneys, and beef brain in favor of highly processed options, we kind of have to ask the question, could we be inadvertently depriving our minds of the very foundational material required to think, remember, and thrive? It is a fascinating look at how our daily diet might be dictating our actual cognitive reality. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep feeding your brain.